The email landed in my inbox at 2:47 a.m. A single line that shattered my world. Check the company records. Elise. He's been lying. My hands trembled as I opened the attached files. Each one a digital dagger slicing through 16 years of marriage. By dawn, I knew the truth. Mark, my husband, had stolen my business. The one I'd built from sleepless nights and endless hustle, and thought he'd gotten away with it. I sat frozen at my kitchen table, the coffee I'd poured hours ago now cold in its mug. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was surgical, calculated. Mark had manipulated board members, forged my signatures, and siphoned funds into a shadow company he thought I'd never find. But he didn't know I'd been watching, quietly gathering evidence for months, or that I held the key to his own secret Empyrea venture he believed was his alone. I'd always been the planner, the one who saw 10 steps ahead. Mark was the charmer, the face of our joint ventures. But I was the architect. My company, Luminary Labs, started in our garage with a laptop and a dream to revolutionize renewable energy storage. I coded the first prototype myself, a battery system that could power entire neighborhoods sustainably. Mark handled the pitches, dazzling investors with his easy smile and quick wit. Together, we were unstoppable, or so I thought. 6 months ago, I noticed discrepancies in our financials. Small at first, missing invoices, odd transfers. I chalked it up to clerical errors, but my gut screamed otherwise. I hired a private auditor, a move I kept from Mark, and the truth unraveled like a cheap sweater. He'd created a shell company, Nexus Innovations, and was funneling Luminary Labs profits into it. Worse, he'd convinced our board I was unstable, pushing me out of my own company while I was on a rare vacation. The audacity stung. I'd trusted him, not just as a husband, but as a partner. We'd built a life together, 2 kids, a house in the suburbs, vacations to the Cape. But as I stared at the evidence, I saw a stranger. Mark wasn't just stealing my work. He was erasing me. The kids were asleep upstairs, oblivious to the storm brewing. I wanted to scream, to confront him, but I'd learned long ago that rage without a plan is just noise. Instead, I dug deeper. The auditor's report led me to Nexus's records, buried in encrypted files Mark thought were untouchable. That's when I found it. Nexus wasn't just his side hustle, it was his golden parachute, a startup poised to launch a rival battery tech. But here's the kicker: I recognized the tech. It was mine, an older prototype I'd shelved years ago. He'd stolen it, tweaked it, and was passing it off as his own. The arrogance was almost admirable. Then came the real bombshell. Nexus wasn't fully his. Through a maze of shell companies and silent partnerships, I discovered I'd unknowingly invested in it years ago through a venture capital fund I co-managed. I controlled 80% of Nexus's shares, a fact Mark was clueless about. He thought he was the kingpin, but I held the crown. I didn't sleep that night. I mapped out my next moves, each one precise, like laying stones for a path only I could see. Confronting Mark directly would be satisfying but short-sighted. He'd charm his way out, spin a story, maybe even turn it on me. No, I needed to dismantle his empire quietly, piece by piece, and let him think he was winning until the end. By morning, I was ready. Mark stumbled downstairs, bleary-eyed, muttering about a late meeting. "You okay, Elise?" he asked, pouring coffee, his voice dripping with false concern. I smiled, the kind of smile that hides a storm. "Never better," I said, and he didn't notice the edge in my voice. He kissed my forehead, oblivious, and left for the office, the one he thought he'd stolen. I called my lawyer, Sarah, a shark in a pantsuit who'd handled my early contracts. "I need you to move fast," I told her, forwarding the auditor's report. "Mark's been playing dirty, but I've got something dirtier." Sarah laughed, a sharp, delighted sound. "Oh, Elise, this is going to be fun." We spent the day strategizing, Nexus was set to launch in 3 months. A high-profile debut with investors already buzzing. Mark had planned a gala, a self-congratulatory spectacle to unveil his tech. I'd let him have his moment. Let him bask in the spotlight, then I'd pull the rug out. First, I needed allies. I reached out to 2 board members I still trusted, Karen and Raj, who'd been uneasy about Mark's recent power grab. Over lunch, I laid out the evidence-forged documents, siphoned funds, the works. Karen's face hardened. Raj swore under his breath. He played us, Karen said, her voice low. What do you need from us? Loyalty, I said, and silence. For now. They nodded, their anger matching mine. I wasn't just fighting for my company. I was fighting for every woman who'd been underestimated, erased by someone they trusted. Next, I contacted the venture capital fund. The manager, Tom, was an old friend who owed me a favor. I explained my stake in Nexus, and he confirmed it. 80% of the shares were mine, tucked away in a trust I'd set up years ago. Mark had no idea. You want to liquidate? Tom asked. Not yet, I said. I want to own him first. The plan was simple but brutal. I'd let Mark build Nexus to its peak. Let him pour his heart into it. Then, at the gala, I'd reveal my control, expose his theft, and take back everything Luminary Labs, Nexus, and my dignity. But first, I had to play the part of the oblivious wife, the one he thought he'd outsmarted. That night, Mark came home late, smelling faintly of bourbon. Big day tomorrow, he said, loosening his tie. Nexus is getting traction. I nodded, stirring pasta on the stove, my face a mask of calm. That's great. Honey, I said, my voice sweet as poison. Inside, I was counting down the days until I'd destroy him. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk. Every smile I gave Mark, every casual "how's work," was a performance, each word laced with the weight of my secret. I was living 2 lives, the devoted wife cooking dinner for our kids, and the strategist plotting to reclaim what was mine. Mark was oblivious, strutting around like a peacock. He'd come home buzzing about Nexus, dropping hints about big investors and game-changing tech. I listened, nodding, while my mind cataloged every detail. He thought he was untouchable, but every word he spoke was another nail in his coffin. I kept my evidence locked in a safe, digital and physical copies, ready for the moment I'd strike. Meanwhile, I worked in the shadows. Sarah, my lawyer, was building an airtight case. She'd uncovered more. Mark had bribed a junior accountant to falsify Luminary Labs records, and he'd been meeting with a rival firm, pitching my stolen tech as his own. The audacity was staggering, but it fueled me. Each discovery sharpened my resolve, like a blade honed for battle. I also reached out to Clara, a tech journalist I'd known since college. She had a knack for sniffing out corporate scandals and a readership that could amplify my story. Over coffee, I slid her a USB drive with the highlights without revealing my full plan. This is explosive, Elise, she said, her eyes wide. When do you want it to go public? Not yet, I said, but be ready. Clara nodded, tucking the drive into her bag. I trusted her to wait, but I knew the story would hit like a tsunami when the time came. At home, I kept up appearances. Our kids, Emma and Lucas, were my anchor. Emma, 12, was all questions and curiosity, asking why I seemed different. Lucas, 8, just wanted me to play Minecraft with him. I hugged them a little tighter, shielding them from the storm I knew was coming. They didn't need to know their father had betrayed us yet. Mark, meanwhile, was slipping. He'd always been meticulous, but his confidence was making him sloppy. One night, he left his laptop open, a spreadsheet glowing on the screen. I glimpsed Nexus's financials, investor names, funding rounds, projected profits. I snapped a photo with my phone, my heart racing. It was another piece of the puzzle. Proof he was over-leveraging Nexus to fund his betrayal. I also started digging into his personal life. If he was bold enough to steal my company, what else was he hiding? I hired a private investigator, a discreet woman named Dana who specialized in corporate espionage. Her first report was a gut punch. Mark was having an affair with a marketing exec from the rival firm. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. Not because I still loved him, I wasn't sure I did anymore, but because it was another layer of deceit. Dana's photos showed them at a hotel bar, laughing, his hand on her arm. I stared at the images, my stomach churning. But I didn't cry. I filed them away with the rest of my evidence. Another weapon in my arsenal. If Mark thought he could destroy me, he was about to learn how wrong he was. My next move was riskier. I needed to secure Luminary Labs board. Karen and Raj were on my side, but the others were either loyal to Mark or on the fence. I arranged a secret meeting with the board's chair, Evelyn, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who'd always respected my work. Over wine at her house, I laid out the truth: Mark's theft, the forged signatures, the shell company. I showed her the auditor's report. The paper trail, undeniable. Evelyn's face was stone, but her eyes burned. "He's done," she said finally. "But we need to be smart. If we move too soon, he'll lawyer up and drag this out." I nodded, grateful for her pragmatism. "What's your play, Elise?" she asked. "I let him think he's won," I said. "He's planning a gala for Nexus's launch. That's when I take it all back." Evelyn raised her glass, a grim smile on her lips. "To his downfall," she said. We clinked glasses, sealing our alliance. Back home, I kept my routine airtight. I cooked, helped with homework, tucked the kids in. But late at night, I worked. I analyzed Nexus's structure, its investors, its weaknesses. I found a vulnerability. Mark had overpromised to his backers, banking on a prototype that wasn't ready. If I could delay his launch, even by a week, his funding would crumble. And I knew just how to do it. I contacted a supplier Nexus relied on, posing as a concerned investor. I dropped hints about instability in the company's leadership, enough to make them pause their shipments. It was a small move, but it would ripple. Mark would scramble. His investors would panic, and I'd be waiting in the wings. One night, as I worked, Emma crept downstairs. "Mom, why are you always on your computer?" she asked, her voice small. I closed my laptop, pulling her into a hug. "Just fixing some things, sweetheart," I said. She didn't need to know the details, but I vowed she'd never feel this kind of betrayal. I'd protect her, Lucas, and myself no matter the cost. Mark came home late again, his tie loose, his eyes glassy. "Big things coming, Elise," he said, grinning. "Nexus is going to change everything." I smiled, my heart cold. "I bet it will," I said, and he didn't hear the promise in my words. The gala was 3 weeks away, and the tension in our house was a living thing, coiled and ready to strike. Mark was in his element, planning every detail of Nexus's launch like a general preparing for battle. I played along, asking innocent questions about catering and guest lists, all while tightening the noose. Sarah, my lawyer, was relentless. She drafted a series of legal maneuvers to reclaim Luminary Labs, including a shareholder lawsuit that would freeze Mark's assets the moment I gave the word. But the real ace was Nexus. My 80% stake gave me control, but I needed to wield it surgically. If I revealed it too soon, Mark might find a way to wriggle free. Timing was everything. I started sowing doubt among Nexus's investors. Using an alias, I emailed key stakeholders, hinting at concerns about the company's leadership and tech. I didn't lie, just pointed them toward gaps in Mark's story. One investor, a hedge fund manager named Greg, took the bait, demanding an audit. Mark was furious, pacing our living room, ranting about meddling busybodies. I nodded sympathetically, hiding my smile. Dana, The PI sent me more dirt. Mark's affair was escalating late-night calls. Secret trips. The marketing exec, Vanessa, wasn't just a fling. She was in on the scheme, helping Mark pitch my stolen tech. I felt a flicker of pity for her. She didn't know she was a pawn in a game she'd already lost. But pity didn't stop me from forwarding Dana's photos to Sarah, who added them to our case file. The kids were starting to notice the cracks. Emma caught me crying one night. A rare moment of weakness. "Are you and Dad okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. I wiped my eyes, pulling her close. "We're working through some things," I said, hating the half-truth. Lucas was quieter, retreating into his video games. I made a mental note to spend more time with them once this was over. They deserved better than a fractured family. I leaned harder on my allies. Karen and Raj rallied the board, quietly securing votes to reinstate me as CEO of Luminary Labs. Evelyn, the board chair, was a rock, coordinating with Sarah to ensure our legal moves were airtight. "You're playing chess while he's playing checkers," she told me over the phone. I laughed, but it was hollow. This wasn't a game, it was my life. To keep Mark distracted, I fed his ego. I complimented his vision for Nexus, asked for updates, even offered to help with the gala. He ate it up, oblivious to my motives. "You're being so supportive," he said one night, squeezing my hand. I smiled, my skin crawling. "Anything for you," I said, and the lie tasted like ash. My supplier's sabotage was working. Nexus's production stalled, and Mark was scrambling. He spent hours on calls, his voice tight with panic. "It's just a hiccup," he told me, but his eyes betrayed him. I knew that look, fear. He was starting to feel the walls closing in, even if he didn't know why. Clara, the journalist, was ready to pounce. I gave her the green light to start digging publicly, leaking just enough to stir buzz without tipping my hand. Her first article, a vague piece about questions surrounding Nexus's tech, hit the wires. Mark was livid, slamming his laptop shut. "Who's feeding them this crap?" he shouted. I shrugged, stirring my tea. "People talk, Mark. You know how it is." I also reached out to Vanessa's husband, Paul, a quiet IT consultant I'd met at a company event. I didn't tell him about the affair, it would come later, but I hinted that Mark's business dealings might affect him. "Keep an eye on your finances," I said. Paul frowned, confused, but promised to look into it. Another seed planted. The gala loomed, and I finalized my plan. I'd attend as Mark's wife, the picture of loyalty, then unveil my control of Nexus during his keynote. Sarah had prepared a presentation, a devastating slideshow of evidence-forged documents, stolen tech, financial trails. Clara would be there, ready to break the story. The board would vote to reinstate me that night, and Mark's empire would crumble. But there was a wild card, Mark's temper. He'd never been violent, but betrayal could push people to dark places. I installed a security system at the house, just in case, and told Sarah to have a restraining order ready. I wasn't taking chances. The night before the gala, Mark came home late, his face drawn. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice soft. He nodded, but his hands shook as he poured a drink. "Just stress," he said. I watched him, my heart a mix of anger and pity. He'd brought this on himself, but part of me mourned the man I thought he was. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, everything would change. I'd reclaim my company, my life, my power. But the cost was heavy: marriage, my kids' innocence, the future I'd imagined. I closed my eyes, steeling myself. This was war, and I was ready to win. The gala was a glittering facade, a ballroom draped in gold and crystal, filled with investors, tech moguls, and Mark's inflated ego. I wore a sleek black dress, my smile polished to perfection, playing the role of the supportive wife. Inside, I was a coiled spring, ready to unleash a reckoning. Mark was in his element, working the room with handshakes and laughter. He didn't notice me slipping away to meet Sarah in a quiet corner, where she handed me a USB drive. "Everything's loaded," she whispered. "The board's ready. And Clara's got her camera crew." I nodded, my pulse steady despite the storm in my chest. This was a moment I'd been building toward. I mingled, making small talk with investors I knew were in we. I'd been studying Mark's moves for months, and I knew his tells. He was nervous tonight. His smiles too wide. His gestures too sharp. He felt the pressure, even if he didn't know why. The keynote was scheduled for 9 p.m. At 8:45, I slipped into the control room, where Raj was waiting. He'd rigged the projector to play my presentation after Mark's. "You sure about this?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded. "He stole my life. Raj, I'm taking it back." At 9, Mark took the stage, his voice booming with confidence. He unveiled Nexus's revolutionary battery tech, his eyes gleaming with pride. The crowd applauded, and I felt a surge of nausea. This was the man I'd loved, the father of my children, and he'd built his empire on lies. As his speech ended, I stepped to the podium. The room hushed, confused. Mark's smile faltered. "Elise," he said, his voice tight. I ignored him, plugging in the USB drive. The screen lit up with the first slide, the truth about Nexus innovations. "This won't take long," I said, my voice clear and sharp. I clicked through the slide's forged documents. Financial trails, emails proving Mark's theft. The crowd murmured, then gasped. Mark's face went white, his hands gripping the podium. "What the hell is this?" he hissed. I faced him, my eyes cold. "This is justice. Mark. You stole Luminary Labs, my life's work. You thought you could erase me." I clicked to the final slide. "Elise Harper owns 80% of Nexus Innovations." The room erupted in whispers. Mark staggered back, his eyes wild. "That's impossible," he stammered. "Check the records," I said. "I've owned you all along." I turned to the crowd, my voice steady. "Effective immediately. I'm dissolving Nexus and reclaiming Luminary Labs as CEO." The board, led by Evelyn, stood in solidarity, their faces grim but resolute. Mark lunged toward me, but security stepped in, escorting him off stage. The crowd was in chaos, cameras flashing. Clara's team was filming, her article already drafted. I stepped down, my heart pounding but my head high. I'd won, but the victory felt hollow. Backstage, Sarah hugged me. "You did it," she said. I nodded, but my eyes were on the exit where Mark had been taken. I destroyed him, but at what cost? The kids were at home, unaware their world had just shattered. I thanked Sarah and slipped out, needing air. Outside, I called Paul, Vanessa's husband. "You need to know something," I said, and told him about the affair. His silence was deafening. Then he thanked me, his voice breaking. I hung up, staring at the stars. I'd reclaimed my power, but the pieces of my life were scattered, and I didn't know how to put them back together. The fallout was immediate and brutal. By morning, Clara's article was everywhere, headlines screaming about Mark's fraud, my takeover, and the collapse of Nexus. Social media was a firestorm, with hashtags like Elise Harper and Nexus scandal trending. I stayed offline, focusing on the kids. Emma was quiet at breakfast, her eyes searching mine. "Is Dad in trouble?" she asked. Lucas looked up, his cereal untouched. I took a deep breath, choosing honesty. "Yes, sweetheart. He did some things that hurt the company, and we're fixing it." Emma nodded, but Lucas started crying. I held them both, my heart breaking. This wasn't just about Mark, and Mike was their world, too. Sarah called with updates. The board had voted unanimously to reinstate me as CEO of Luminary Labs. Mark was facing lawsuits from investors and criminal charges for fraud. "He's done, Elise," Sarah said. But you need to prepare for the media storm. I thanked her, already dreading the spotlight. I met with the board that afternoon, laying out my vision to rebuild Luminary Labs. Karen and Raj were vocal supporters, while Evelyn offered strategic advice. You've got the reins now, she said. Don't let go. I nodded, feeling the weight of leadership settle back on my shoulders. It was mine again, but it felt different, harder, lonelier. Mark called that evening, his voice desperate. Elise, we can fix this. For the kids. I laughed. A bitter sound. You stole my company. Mark. You betrayed us all. There's no fixing this. I hung up, my hands shaking. The kids were upstairs, and I couldn't let them see me break. Dana, the PI, sent a final report. Vanessa had been fired from the rival firm, and Paul was filing for divorce. I felt a pang of guilt for dragging him into this, but he deserved the truth. I emailed him an apology, promising to help however I could. His reply was brief. Thank you for your honesty. I spent the night drafting a press release, announcing Luminary Labs' new direction. I emphasized integrity, innovation, and rebuilding trust. Clara reviewed it, calling it perfectly pitched. It went out at midnight, and by morning, the response was overwhelmingly positive. The industry respected strength, and I'd shown it. But at home, the cracks were showing. Emma started asking questions about the future, about whether Mark would come back. I didn't have answers, only promises to keep them safe. Lucas clung to me, his small body shaking. I realized then that my victory had come at a price I hadn't fully grasped. I hired a therapist for the kids, someone to help them process the upheaval. For myself, I leaned on Sarah and Clara, who became my sounding boards. You're a warrior, Clara told me over wine one night. But warriors need rest. I smiled, but sleep was a distant memory. My mind was on the next steps, rebuilding the company, protecting my family, moving forward. Mark's lawyers reached out, proposing a settlement. Sarah laughed when she read it. He's offering you half of nothing, she said. We've got him dead to rights. I told her to reject it. I wasn't interested in his scraps. I'd take everything he owed me through the courts. The kids and I started a new routine: movie nights, board games, anything to feel normal. One night, Emma asked, "Are you happy now, Mom?" I paused, searching for the truth. "I'm proud," I said finally. "And I'm here for you." It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough for now. Rebuilding Luminary Labs was like climbing a mountain I'd already scaled once, only this time with heavier baggage. I threw myself into work, restructuring the company to prioritize transparency and innovation. The team rallied behind me, their trust hard-earned but unwavering. We launched a new battery prototype, one I'd been developing in secret, and it outshone Mark's stolen version. The industry took notice, and orders poured in. But the personal toll was relentless. Emma started acting out, skipping school, her grades slipping. Lucas had nightmares, calling for his dad. I felt like I was failing them, even as I fought to rebuild our lives. The therapist helped, but healing was slow. I started joining their sessions, learning to listen to their pain instead of fixing it. Mark's legal battles escalated. Sarah kept me updated. Fraud, embezzlement, and forgery charges were piling up. He was out on bail, living in a cheap apartment, his charm useless now. Part of me wanted to gloat, but I was too tired. I just wanted him gone from our lives. Clara's articles kept the pressure on, exposing more of Mark's shady deals. She uncovered ties to offshore accounts, which triggered an IRS investigation. "You've got a fan base now," she told me, grinning. "People love a comeback story." I didn't feel like a hero, just a woman trying to hold it together. Paul reached out, thanking me again. He was rebuilding his life, too, and we bonded over our shared betrayal. "If you ever need to talk," he said, "I'm here." I appreciated it, but I wasn't ready for new connections. My focus was on the kids and the company. One night, Emma found me working late and sat down, her eyes serious. I read the articles. Mom, I know what Dad did. My heart sank. I tried to shield her, but she was too smart. Are we going to be okay? She asked. I hugged her, tears burning. Yes, baby. We're tougher than he ever was. I started mentoring young women in tech, sharing my story to inspire them. It gave me purpose, a reminder of why I'd built Luminary Labs in the first place. At a conference, I spoke about resilience, and the standing ovation caught me off guard. Maybe Clara was right, people love to come back. Mark tried contacting the kids, but I blocked him, following Sarah's advice. He's a liability, she said. The courts agreed, granting me full custody temporarily. The kids were hurt, but I promised we'd navigate it together. Lucas started smiling again, a small victory. By the end of the month, Luminary Labs stock was climbing, and Nexus was officially dissolved. My 80% stake had been liquidated, the funds reinvested into my company. I was winning, but late at night, staring at the ceiling, I wondered if I'd ever feel whole again. A year later, life was a new kind of normal. Luminary Labs was thriving, our new battery tech dominating the market. I'd hired a stellar team, including Karen as COO, and we were pushing boundaries I'd only dreamed of before. The industry called me a trailblazer, but I just felt like a survivor. The kids were healing. Emma joined the debate team, channeling her anger into sharp-witted arguments. Lucas found solace in art, his drawings filling the house with color. We moved to a new home, smaller but ours, free of Mark's shadow. Family dinners became our ritual, laughter slowly replacing silence. Mark's trial was a media circus. I didn't attend, but Sarah kept me posted. He was convicted on multiple charges, facing years in prison. When the verdict came, I felt no joy, just relief. The kids didn't ask about him anymore, and I didn't push. They'd talk when they were ready. Clara became a close friend, her fears support a lifeline. She wrote a feature on my journey, calling me the woman who took back her empire. I cringed at the drama, but appreciated the sentiment. Paul and I stayed in touch, occasionally meeting for coffee. He was dating again, and I was happy for him. Maybe one day I'd be ready, too. I started a foundation to fund women in STEM, pouring my energy into lifting others up. At its launch event, Emma and Lucas stood beside me, proud. You're a superhero, Mom, Lucas whispered. I laughed, ruffling his hair. Just doing my job, kid. Late at night, I'd sometimes look at old photos Mark and me in happier times. I didn't miss him, but I mourned the life I'd thought we had. The betrayal had scarred me, but it also forged me. I was stronger, sharper, unafraid. Luminary Labs won a Global Innovation Award, and I accepted it with Emma and Lucas in the audience, their cheers louder than the crowd's. Backstage, Evelyn hugged me, her eyes misty. You've redefined power, Elise. I smiled, feeling it for the first time. As I tucked the kids in that night, Emma asked, "What's next, Mom?" I kissed her forehead, then Lucas's. Everything, I said, and I meant it. The future was ours, and no one would ever take it away again.